bad.
What's up? This is your host, Ricardo Renz, also known as Ricky Brands, and a great episode for you today. Today we have somebody you guys might have seen an interview with in the past, especially during the height of the lockdown when everybody was getting shut down, and a brave soul from New Jersey, Ian Smith, decided, I'm not shutting down my gym. I'm going to stay open. So he shares that story and much more. What a interesting, intelligent guest. I'll make this intro short because I'm a couple podcasts behind. This podcast is about a week old, and I've done another podcast with Dr. Jessica Rose, which hopefully you guys will also be seeing very soon in the RSS feed. And then I have a Patreon podcast I did. So all these shows hopefully will be out very soon. So I'll hurry up with this intro. This is a Value for Value show. If you get some value out of this conversation or any of my conversations you hear on the Ripple Effect podcast, please consider supporting the show. If you can't financially support the show, which I know many of you guys can't because times are tough and the future is uncertain, share the show, review the show, tell people about the show. That goes a long way. If you're in a good financial situation where you can financially support the show, please consider doing so. Go on to rippleeffectpodcast.com, hit support, and you can find all the ways to support the show. You can join our Patreon page. You can get some merch. You can donate via PayPal. And thank you, everybody who has. I also have a crypto wallet if anybody wants to donate crypto. And of course, the goal is and will always be to eventually do the show full time. That's what I would absolutely love to do this show full time and focus all my free time on the Union of the Unwanted and Ripple Effect podcast. I really think I could get some of the best guests, really focus on having the best conversations with very little to no other distractions. So that's the dream, and I'll keep on dreaming. So enjoy the show, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Sure. So I actually got into fitness. I did 6 years in prison during my 20s, and that was something that truly kind of changed me. And you know, you go into prison and you have pretty much everything stripped away from you. Your name, the clothes you wear, who you can talk to, who you can't talk to, where you sleep, when you eat. So there's very little of yourself left. And fitness was something that was tangible that nobody could take away from me. You know, every day I could get down on the ground and I could do push-ups, I could do squats, I could do lunges, I could do planks and sit-ups. And it was a project that nobody could take away from me in a time where all I had was time. And, when you go to prison, most people use their time very wastefully. People sit around, they play a lot of cards, they bullshit, they waste their time, they try to just pass because you're just passing time. So I decided to be proactive. I wasn't in shape at all. I was a scrawny kid growing up, scrawny kid with asthma who never wanted to compete in anything, shied away from competition because I didn't want to have to prove myself because I knew I couldn't. And then I fell in love with it because it was something that allowed me, A, to manage stress, and B, to build something that I had never really built before. And when I came out, everybody wanted me to go back to college, and because I was halfway through college, and get a real job. And that's all I heard for years was get a real job, go to college, which I kind of did. I wound up finishing school, but I never wanted an office job. I was always miserable in that kind of environment. I never saw myself flourishing there, but I was somebody who had radically transformed their own body. And in doing so, radically transformed my own confidence and the way that I looked at myself in the world. And that was something that saved me because before I went to prison, I wasn't the most constructive member of society. I was a wild child with absolutely no purpose other than just to, live for the weekends, that kind of really reckless youth that you see a lot these days, actually. So I wanted to share something that radically changed my life for the better with the world. And I wanted to do that by being a personal trainer. So started out working at gyms. I've worked at pretty much every gym you could possibly think of in every position, from the janitor to an assistant general manager. And I hated the corporate gym life. I hated the big box gym feel. I never really fit in with what they were doing for a lot of reasons. I didn't agree with the way that they presented fitness. It was this pushy kind of, here, sign this contract and, we'll make you skinny kind of mentality, when, I had a much different approach. So eventually I went out on my own. I bet all in on myself and just decided that I was gonna be in control of my own clients, and I was gonna be in control of my own business, and I was gonna do fitness my way. And it took off really, really fast. I had actually just moved home. I lived in Arizona for a couple of years. I born and raised in the Philadelphia, Jersey area. And when I had come home, I was kind of dead broke. I was about 100 grand in debt from a bad marriage, and some pretty stupid financial decisions on my own, plus a lot of college debt, which I never used. So I kind of humbled myself and moved back home at 30 years old with my parents, and just really focused 100% on building a business. And I did pretty much overnight. I was very fortunate that a lot of people already kind of knew who I was, and people were willing to give me a shot. But I also worked really hard. I was driving around with a Volkswagen Jetta, and in the trunk I had a tire and a sledgehammer and some ladders and some stuff I bought at like Amazon and TJ Maxx. And I would train anybody, no matter where you were at in the state of New Jersey. I would drive to New York. I would drive to Pennsylvania. I would drive to Delaware. Didn't matter if I was driving 7 hours in a day and only had 3 clients. I was just getting the ball rolling. And that picked up really, really fast, to the point where I couldn't fit any more clients because I was too all over the place. So I needed a home base. And that is where I met my current business partner, Frank Trombetti. He's a local businessman in South Jersey. He's owned a store called Rock Bottom Nutrition for 25 years. He basically a GNC, but way better. And he's kind of adapted through the years, because he's probably one of the smartest guys I know, especially when it comes to that sort of stuff. He had some extra space in the back of his store, and I walked in, and we made a handshake deal that day that I was going to pay him to use that space. He actually handed me the key that day and just said, "Do the right thing." He's like, "This is how I feed my family." And that was it. So we worked alongside each other for about 3 years. One day, Frank walked into the back and asked me if I wanted to go in on a partnership at another Rock Bottom at a gym. That gym was called Atilis Gym in Belmar, New Jersey. I said yes. And 1 month later, we decided we were going to buy the gym. And 1 month after that, Frank and I were business partners at the Atilis Gym in Belmar, New Jersey, which at the time was a dumpster fire of a gym. But we bet big on ourselves. We kind of poured everything we had into it, but we knew we could make it work. And from day one, we did. We bought that gym and turned it around. And 8 months later, we got the shutdown notice for COVID-19.
Yeah, there's so many reasons why I think your story is fascinating and important. One, there's so many people out there who are told, go get a real job, go get a real job. The truth is, getting what people consider a real job a lot of times isn't, it's not one size fits all. Like, it might pay well, but if you're unhappy, what good is that? And if you find something, your niche, if you find something you love, something that doesn't feel like work to you, you'll work harder than ever, instead of working a job where you're looking at the time, just waiting to, for the clock to come. And a lot of people are in that state. I mean, before 2020, so many people were already on the edge, because especially in America, where they're so just overworked, so many people are doing unfulfilling jobs. They have the same journey and went down the same road that you went down. And then, I've been down, where you just end up doing an unfulfilling job. You feel like you have no purpose, and that's it. And it's like, and then, like you said, you end up just buying material things or looking forward to the weekend to give you something to wake
Yep.
up for. And so and then when 2020 came around and they took away one of the methods I think a lot of people in America use to deal with that stress or unfulfillment, and that's going to the gym, getting some of that frustration out, getting some of that or maybe just hitting reset and detaching from the rest of the world. Because I've been a gym rat my whole life. One of the things I was so upset about was the logic behind let's shut down gyms to help people's health.
What logic?
Yeah, what logic? Exactly. But as when you get older, and so many people that I typically go to the gym 4, 5, 6 days a week. I'll take a day off from here to there during the week, counting on my schedule and stuff. But you see the same people in every single day. And the one conversation I kept having with people over and over again was like and this was prior to shutting down the gym, because my local gym was actually one of the last gyms that shut down. And even when they had restrictions on how many people could be in the gym, they had a line out the door, like with people, they were counting, because they're like, we're going to do everything it takes to kind of keep this place open. And everybody you talk to, it's like, we weren't in line because we wanted to just stay lean or to keep our six pack. We're in line because it was for psychological health. It was for depression. It was for, all these other things. I mean, I'm sure, much like myself, you get into working out at first for that self-confidence, but I'm sure now it's like you're working out for all these other benefits, right?
Well, I mean, what these idiots who call themselves public health officials don't understand is that health is not this one-dimensional entity where COVID is the trump card. There's so many aspects of health that range from the physical to the mental, and actually a lot of that interconnects. Been doing this for about 12 years now, and it doesn't take a rocket science. You don't have to have some fancy degree and a bunch of letters behind your name. You just look at it with common sense. If you start treating your body better, you're going to feel better. If you feel better, you're going to continue to be better. And that's what affects the body affects the mind. What affects the mind affects the body. And it's this positive feedback cycle where if you begin to nourish one, the other will benefit. And by the other benefiting, you're nourishing, you're just snowballing. So, and a lot work themselves out really dark. We have a gym. We are not a fancy gym. We're a shoes off. People walk around bare feet, chalk on the floor. We're loud. There's a lot of stuff you've never seen in our gym. And there's one thing that's very common, or that is the common thread of everybody that comes to our gym, is everybody comes there to work their asses off. So we have athletes, we have powerlifters, we have high school athletes, we have bodybuilders, we have strongmen, we have people that are just in the gym because they love to look good and feel good, or they love to be strong, or whatever it is. But nobody's there to check their abs in the mirror, and for that being the only reason. People are interested in longevity. They're interested in finding positive and constructive ways to release stress. It's also a social place. Everybody that comes to the gym, they come to the gym at the same times. The same people are there. These people become their friends. They socialize. These are all healthy things to do. And they didn't want us doing any of it, which makes absolutely no sense, because especially when you lay out the public policy of what they deemed to be essential, while at the same time closing down gyms and closing down churches so that people couldn't have AA and stuff like that. These are all aspects of health. They kept fast food open. There's about 30 to 40 years of solid research that shows fast food will only decrease your immune system. It has no positive effects other than to satisfy the current cravings you have. There's zero health benefits to eating a Big Mac. They kept Big Macs open, right? They closed down farmers markets and stuff like that. That's probably one of the best places you can go to buy food. They closed down churches and places of worship. This has to do with emotional and spiritual health. They closed down hair salons and nail salons and gyms. All of these places are both physically good for you, but you can't put a price tag on how important it is for a woman to go on Friday after she's raised her kids all week and taken care of her family, to go on Friday and like get a blowout and talk to the girls at the salon. There's health there. because that makes that might make that woman feel good, or she might have a conversation that day that she needs to have. They kept open in New Jersey, at least. I don't know where you're located, but in New Jersey, at least, not only did they keep liquor stores open, but they made alcohol essential. So they said, we got to keep the liquor stores open because, God forbid, we can't have an overflow of people, suffering, whatever, whatever the term they used, going to withdrawal. Excuse me, I had a brain fart there. They went a step further and they gave restaurants takeout alcohol licenses. So you could buy like margaritas to go from Chili's. That's not about making sure somebody doesn't go through withdrawal. That's about making sure that you can continue to collect some tax revenue, because there's absolutely nothing healthy about pulling up to Chili's and getting a margarita to go. But they made that essential over gyms and all these other places that we mentioned. So it's just, it was a joke of a policy from the beginning. And that was our problem. You have all these scientists and doctors and fancy government, so-called public health officials, but where's the epidemiologist in this? There's no epidemiology that ever was put forth, or none of these people making public policy are epidemiologists. They're all virologists and just obscure doctors, like Dr. Fauci, who's pretty much done nothing right his whole life, making policy for Americans on their health. And none of it makes sense. You can put it all on the table, and even the average person with almost no medical background can look at that and say, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Well, the thing that you're saying that's so important is that mental health and physical health, they're not two separate things. They go hand in hand. And they're connected. I mean, there's a great book by Dr. Sorno. He was like one of the leading back surgeons in the US. I think he passed away now, but he wrote a book called Mind Over Back Pain. And what he found was these, are you familiar with the book?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it just showed that a lot of the pain was coming from mental stress, and it was internal. It wasn't external. I mean, a lot of self-medication, when you look at like the Rat Park experiment in Canada, when they basically were trying to, are you familiar with it, Rat Park?
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
So they had this study where they put a substance in the water. I believe it was cocaine or heroin, and the mouse was in this cage, and it kept coming back to the water that had the substance, not the regular water, until it eventually died. Well, these people in Canada, these scientists are like, well, one thing we're not taking in consideration, that the cage has become a part of the experiment. So they put it in its natural habitat. They created a giant rat park out of a warehouse, and it had other mice to play with and things to do. They created the same experiment, had two waters, and it never went to the substance, and it was a completely different outcome. They realized, like, okay,
pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because a lot of times we think self-medication is because of the substance is addictive, but like, this made much more sense to me than our traditional look at addiction, because I'm like, why can we go to a party and a bunch of people do a line of coke? One person ends up ruining his life and becoming an addict and getting arrested because of that line of coke. Another person says it's not for me and never does it again. If it has the same addictive properties, what's the difference between the two people? Well, it's not the substance, it must be the individual. So it's another look at depression and anxiety, how a lot of these things are internal, not external. So what you're doing,
even if you
go ahead.
If you piggyback off of that, they essentially set up everybody in that cage, because that cage represents a lack of other options, and I think what you were getting at, and what that experiment shows, is that if you give people resources and options and freedom, they won't necessarily choose the worst thing. But if you start to limit those things, then they're obviously, like, the less they have to choose from, the more unhappy they're going to be, the more likely they are to kind of self-sabotage and look for these vices and these bad things. And they created a perfect environment for that in 2020. Going back to what I said earlier, when they closed down churches, like the number one the playbook for addiction, right? What do? You go to meetings and you go to the gym. That's literally the playbook that works for 90% of the people struggling with any form of addiction, whether it be a substance, whether it be something like gambling or sex or anything like that. You get these people into a place that's positive and that starts to open up their social circle and give them more options and more freedoms, they're going to take it. And they created the exact opposite environment. And then they wonder, they don't wonder, because I don't even know if they care, but you wonder why everybody took such a downturn over the past year or the past year and a half, or why so many people did. You know, how many people relapsed? You know, we'll probably never know that number. How many people took their lives because of the situation? We'll never know that number. You know, how many people made really bad choices and kind of dug themselves into a hole that they're now struggling to dig themselves out of because they were put in a position where they shouldn't have been put in that position. People shouldn't have been losing their jobs. People shouldn't have been sitting at home locked in their houses. You know, these are all things that were on Frank and I's mind when we said, fuck this, we're opening. Because it just, none of it, I mean, we could have do an entire episode on this alone. The repercussions of this extended lockdown, you know, and that's just something that Frank and I saw very early. You know, and I use one example because it's really powerful for Frank and I both personally. It's a member of the gym that we care very deeply for. You know, we love all of our members, and we're a big family, but particular member was a United States Marine Corps veteran, or is a United States Marine Corps veteran, Afghan vet, highly decorated, has 2 Purple Hearts, was blown up to the point where he was bedridden for a year with broken back, and, you know, had to relearn how to walk. You know, and this individual comes into the gym every single day, and nicest guy you'll ever meet, but a man that has seen and done things that nobody should have to do, did it willingly, and would do it again to protect his family, community, and his country. I mean, this is somebody you want on your team, but somebody who carries a heavy cross because of that willingness to protect others. Comes into the gym every day at about 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, walks in, says hello, and absolutely crushes his workout every single day. He leaves a full shade darker because he's drenched in sweat from head to toe. Whatever he's wearing is a full shade darker. When he leaves every day, he can go home and he can be a father to his 2 little boys, and he can be a husband to his wife. Without the gym, he is unable to do that to the best of his abilities. He's either given the option for medication by the Veterans Association or the VA, which he doesn't want and has not proven to be good for him. And the other one would be alcohol. And on day 1, when we reopened our doors, you know, we were inside the gym all night that night. You know, Sunday night going into Monday, we were tipped off that the police weren't going to let us in the building on Monday morning, so we chained ourselves inside overnight, and we had brown paper up on the walls and on the windows. You know, and at 7 o'clock when we cracked the doors open, there was a couple hundred people out in the parking lot. You know, supported. There was about 500 people out in the parking lot supporting. There was news cameras from every news agency in the country, and to the left there was all of our members wrapped around the building waiting, and that individual was first in line. And he had been out there since like 4 o'clock that morning. He was the first person there. And he came up to Frank and I, and he gave us this big hug. And he was like, "You guys are my heroes." He's like, "You guys saved my life." And he walked in. And that was a moment that, like, Frank and I knew right there. It was like, this is the right thing to do, you know, because, and he said it over again. And his father came in months later and said, like, you know, I don't know if you guys know how close he was or how bad things were getting, you know, but he's like, I was going to lose my son, you know, and that's, who thinks of that? You know, where's the public health in that? Why is his, you know, struggles or his health less important than, you know, COVID? It's not. And that was the driving force behind what we did. You know, because we're actually health professionals. We actually care about providing a service to the community and being there for people who want the gym and need the gym. And there's a lot of people for a lot of different reasons.
That's the part that would piss me off the most, was like, how are you picking and choosing which issue should get all our attention and is more important. So if somebody dies of COVID, like that is super important. We have to prevent that at all costs. But if that cost comes with other costs like addiction, I mean, suicide rates were higher than COVID deaths in California. I mean, all the things that you can't even quantify, like child abuse, alcoholism, substance abuse, people who are going to deal with depression, anxiety, and substance abuse for years to come because their small businesses are still in debt from trying to survive 2020. Like all these things you can't even account for. Like none of that fucking matters. Like that doesn't matter. But the COVID death is the most important thing. It's like, and then how many, it drives me nuts.
Infuriating.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's infuriating. That's what makes this issue so hard to talk to people about, because it's like, in a way, you almost feel bad for them. Like, how much more evidence do you need before you wake up? Like, okay, I'm not Alex Jones connecting a bunch of far dots. Like, there's enough dots where it's like, give Alex Jones some credit because there's actually enough dots. He's right this time. Like they lied and lied and lied and lied. It went from like 2 weeks to flatten the curve to 3 shots to keep your job. I just read that meme.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
and it's a meme, but it's incredibly accurate. And that was what was concerning for us from day one. We weren't excited about the idea of shutting down, but we did because we didn't know enough to confidently stay open. But as soon as we started paying attention, there was just too much hypocrisy and too much that didn't make sense. And then, on day 11 of 14 days, you pass a $2.6 trillion economic stimulus bill that is so far beyond what we've ever spent. It's incredible. And, we read it. It's 1,000 pages long. We read it. There's a lot of stuff that's in there that people had no idea was even in there, but big easy red flag was, why are we giving $600 extra a week for 16 weeks? When we're talking about, we're supposed to be out of this in 3 days, what happened there? And that's not even going into what else is in the bill, because there's some pretty scary stuff in that bill. People, I'll give you one example.
All the other countries that got money, all these other organizations that got, I mean, all this, I'm like, and
you see the biggest one for us was, not only were they incentivizing people to stay home, the federal government was incentivizing states to run tests, knowing that the PCR tests were wildly inaccurate. And not only were they wildly inaccurate, the PCR test is not designed for that. The PCR test is designed to study something. So if you don't have a lot of an object and you want to blow it up and look at it, you use a PCR test. People don't understand this. Here's a simple one, right? They're running about 40 cycles. 40 cycles was like the highest, I think, anywhere between 35 and 40. PCR test picks up one molecule, and a cycle of a PCR test doubles something, right? So 1 turns to 2, 2 turns to 4, 4 turns to 8, 8, 16, so on. Do you have any idea, wild guess, do you have any idea what 40 cycles of something will turn into?
No idea.
1.9 trillion.
That is wild. Well, Kerry Mullis, the guy who created the PCR test,
exactly.
Exactly. Knows his story.
He said it's not used for this, and that's so. Getting back to the original point, the federal government incentivized states to run tests. Not only did they incentivize the hospitals with money for positive or for deaths and for hospitalizations, but they incentivized the state to run tests, and they did so by paying the state. Depending on the state, it got different payouts. I think in New Jersey, for every positive test that the state produced, they were awarded $18,000 of COVID money as like they called it like COVID support money. Where'd that money go? Who did it go to? We'll never know. But you look at, okay, so they know that PCR tests that's not an accurate reflection. They're up to 97% false positive. There are other options, the antigen testing, all that stuff. So they chose the PCR test, they chose the cycles, and then they're incentivizing states to run tests. And then you put that together with the idea of the fact that there was this massive campaign that, oh, you're asymptomatic, so go get tested anyway, knowing that that's a false positive. Like asymptomatic is just another word for not fucking sick.
That's so true. I keep telling people If you went to the doctor and I said, hey, I heard somebody say this, like, if I went to the doctor and said, hey, I have strep throat, and they're like, oh, so your throat hurts? No, I think I'm asymptomatic.
No.
He'd be like, get the fuck out of my office. Like,
Exactly. So, we looked at that stuff, and that was like, it was like, okay, like this isn't adding up, so they lied. These people aren't stupid. This wasn't a mistake. Like, they didn't choose a PCR test, a high cycle PCR test by accident with all the other options out there. These are people that have rigorous educations. They know the options. It's not like they were like, oh, we didn't know that there was a blood antigen test. They knew that. They chose it on purpose. So once we realized that and saw that stuff, that was all the evidence that we needed to go, because it was like, they're gonna destroy us, and Frank drives me nuts sometimes, because he's smart beyond belief, and he's called this every step of the way. And like, sometimes I just wish he was wrong, because he just keeps being proven right. It's incredible. I mean, he called stuff with the vaccine long time ago. He said that they were going to mandate it. He said that they were going to use, the jobs. He said that they were going to use OSHA. And it's like, but he's been right every step of the way. And that was the only thing that separated us from everybody else. Is I think a lot of people put faith in the government, too much faith in the government to do the right thing. But now you have these people, I think everybody can agree, for the most part, everybody agrees that the lockdowns were a bad idea. I think now more than ever, you have a majority opinion on that. But the people who don't, the people who still cling to this, these are the losers of society. You've given these people that contribute nothing, that do nothing typically, that just kind of float by in this void of mediocrity. You've given them like a badge of honor now. Now that they can flash their social virtue all around. They can show their vaccine cards. They can wear their masks, and they can feel heroic while doing absolutely nothing. They don't do anything. They sit at home. They get extra paychecks. And you've weaponized the stupidest and laziest people of society against the most productive. And it was incredibly dumb. Whoever thought of it, or wherever it came from, it wasn't by accident. This was by design. This was an attack on the hardworking American middle class. And that was our read from day one, and it's proven to be true the whole time.
Well, there's an old video of so I've had Jesse Ventura on, but before, but we didn't talk about this. We talked about a bunch of other stuff, but on his show, back in the day, the conspiracy theories with Jesse Ventura, there was somebody said, the cool thing about doing a podcast is that a lot of people send you shit, and sometimes you forget about stuff and you're like, oh crap. And there was a video of one of the episodes on conspiracy theory with Jesse Ventura, where there's a doctor telling Jesse Ventura that they're going to use a pandemic to push a vaccine to help push this depopulation agenda. And at the time, of course, it seemed like Looney Tunes. Alex Jones, I think, was also on that episode. But people who have been in the alternative media community, like myself, for like a lot of the stuff that we've been saying, and even now, even in the last 18 months, you could see how things that seemed absolutely insane 18 months ago. I mean, I remember calling this a bad flu, and people would go irate on social media. I'm like, prove to me that it's not a bad flu. I'm like, turn off the TV and then tell me how many people that are dead from this, and then never mind. So people talk about 700,000 people.
No.
I'm like, I've had Dr. Scott Jensen on multiple times, who actually went back and audited the Minnesota records, and he's a senator and a family physician in Minnesota, and he showed that there was car accidents considered COVID deaths. I mean, literally dying with and by the virus were counted as the same thing. In many cases, for the incentive, you could die under the assumption without ever being tested or showing symptoms, and doctors, and what's crazy is it varied from state to state and from country to country. There was no standard of reporting. So, and they did all this very purposefully. They put shit data into a system in order to get the results that they wanted. And the crazy part is, I don't know how he went through and audited. That's got to be a nightmare. But to unravel it and to actually find the truth is almost next to impossible. Especially on a large scale. But that's pretty awesome that he did that. But it's even they come
out. They come out and admit it later, but they stick it on the CDC website. And if you've ever looked at the CDC website, it is about the most impossible thing to navigate. And they do that on purpose. There's no rhyme or reason to how you find any information. It's just kind of like, they just do it like they'll just put like a million drop down menus and you just have to like figure out where you're going. But if you look at that information, they came out, I guess it was probably about a year ago now. And it was when the deaths were at like, I don't know, 200,000 or something. They came out and quietly said like, oh, there's only like 6,000 that were like actually COVID. The rest were 3 or 4 comorbidities or just labeled as COVID. And they'll release it quietly because then they can say, oh, well, it was on the website, knowing that the average person we live in a heaven society. So as long as they put that 500,000 or that 700,000 on CNN and they blast it up in the top corner of the screen, like some casino game, that they know that's the number that's going to stick. Again, these people aren't stupid. They're not making mistakes. They're whoever hatched this plan. I didn't see that episode of Jesse Ventura. It was just weird because that woman was like spot on. And I think that was like in 2000 something. It was like years in advance.
Yeah.
But they also, these people also talk about it publicly. They run simulations, like this is stuff that it's like, once you see that, you can no longer take these people seriously and be like, oh, they're definitely trying to help. It's like, you just start connecting the dots. And again, you don't have to be Alex Jones. You just have to use a little bit of common sense and maybe just turn off the TV. And you'll see very clearly that this is not by mistake. And it's not only is it very intentional, it's very malicious. And then there's some people who benefit greatly from this. Nobody is benefiting. You're not benefiting, even though, and that's another thing. They made some people feel like they're winning now. The people that get to stay at home and work, they feel like oh, this isn't so bad after all. And it's like, little do you know, your dollar's whittling away to nothing, and you're going to be eating worms soon.
When I had Mickey Willis on the show, who did the Plandemic documentary, the reason why I think that video went viral was because everybody was going through similar things like, we were going through, where you're looking at everything. You're like, none of this is making logical sense. What the TV is telling me and what the reality is telling me, like if I just look around, are two completely different things. The TV is telling me that there should be dead bodies everywhere. They're showing me videos of Chinese people dead on the streets.
The streets.
Yeah, which nobody ever explained, like what the hell happened there. Like that's not what we got, nothing close to it. And it's like, so they were pushing fear and they were scaring people. And then I think when the Plandemic documentary started going viral with Dr. Judy Mikovits, who's also been on the show, people were like, oh shit, this makes way more sense than what the TV's telling me. Like the fact that there's, financial incentive, the fact that like all these other reasons to push this. And then when you look at Event 201, which a lot of people didn't even know about, and then when you watch it, and
they literally spelled it out.
Yeah, it was like when they say, oh, we couldn't have planned for this, you're full of shit. Like you didn't just plan for it, you actually like played it out. You
ran a war game on it.
Yeah, you ran a war game. So I'm like, so when people watch it, I think the reason why it went so viral was because people are like, this makes way more sense, because there's so much confusion. People are like, I don't get it. Like people are dying, there's all this, but I don't. It's like that quote, if you don't watch the news, you're uninformed. If you do watch the news, you're misinformed. And that's exactly what's going on. People who weren't watching the news seem to have a better grip of what was going on than people who were watching the news. And the thing is, I almost feel bad because so many people that were stuck to that TV and they were told to be afraid for months after months after months. Now they're in a car driving by themselves with a mask. Now they're still, overusing hand sanitizer. I see people at the gym still wearing a mask. I'm like, this isn't because of evidence. This is because you've been traumatized.
You've been traumatized. Mm-hmm.
You've been mentally traumatized because at the gym, nobody's cleaning dumbbells. Nobody's cleaning the sprayer that you're using, so we're still all sharing the same sprayer. And, and there's literally the same people that are at the gym every single day before the lockdown are the same people at the gym after lockdown. Like we all survived it. We're all alive and we're all sharing this.
We have had to date, as of this morning, we've had 295,000 visits to our facility and not a single outbreak, nothing. And, we take, safety precautions, but everything that they said originally was wrong. They said oh, it spreads on surfaces. And then they're then the study comes out and it's no, it doesn't at all. And they're well, 6 feet. And then it comes out where it's we just made that number up. It's mass. It's not mass. But when you see, you're exactly right. When you see these people, they've been, and there's a name to the experiment. I think that the Russians ran this experiment back when the KGB was most active, but they found that if you traumatize somebody with just a barrage of just nonstop fear for a certain amount of time, I think it's actually, I could be wrong on this, I think it was 2 weeks actually, which would be kind of funny if that's what the actual thing was, but I think it was 2 weeks or 2 months or something like that. But if you just hit somebody with just constant fear and just tell them they're going to die and whatever, past a certain point, if they've sort of digested that, it completely breaks down their ability to think critically. Their critical thinking is just fried. It doesn't work anymore. At that point, they're traumatized, and they will just listen and they will obey because they are just, all they want to do is be safe. And you've essentially broken them, which is what a lot of this psychological stuff is. It's about demoralization. It's about breaking people down. It's about turning them submissive. One of the things, somebody pointed this out to me and I can't remember, but it was a really, really good point. Navy SEAL friend of mine, he said, when you look at what's going on, right, you see everything's contradictory. It's well, you can wear masks here, but you don't have to wear them here. But the kids have to wear them, but you don't have to do it when you're standing up. You have to do it when you're sitting down. When you go to the bathroom, you got to put it on. And, you don't have to do it in this state, but you have to do it in this state, and this county is different. And, everything's just, one vaccine, 2 vaccines, no vaccines, mask on, mask off. And it's constantly, and he was talking about how in Guantanamo Bay, the people that they're trying to crack, the higher level prisoners, what they'll do is every day they're in a different cell, and each cell is different. So sometimes you'll have a mattress, sometimes you have no mattress, sometimes there's light on, sometimes there's no light on, sometimes it's cold, sometimes the bed's wet, sometimes there's somebody else in there with you, and it's never predictable. And what they found is psychologically humans crave dependent or just being able to predict the situation. We need that predictability. We need that constant, or it fries us. And that's how you get people to break down. And then you look at the way that they've been treating the public, where it's all right, mask mandate. All right, we can take it off. Oh, no, back on. You know what I mean? Okay, keep them on in schools. Businesses are good. Gyms, no, keep them on. And it's just, nothing makes sense. And what you do is people just start to just say, fuck it. Tell me what to do. I can't handle the unpredictability of this. And it's, you look at how they do it on a small scale, and then you look at public policy and you're coincidence? Is that by accident that they did that? Or because the same people that do it to terrorists are the same people that are doing it. I mean, they're the same people. They make the same choices. That's so it makes you wonder.
Yeah, it's psychological. Yeah. They're literally what they were doing mentally to people. I mean, and it's so true. What happened was that people were also getting information overload, where there was all this conflicting information. And when people get that much information, a lot of times, like you said, that's exactly what they do. They throw their hands up. They're like, I don't know what's fucking true. I'm just going to wear the mask and do what they tell me, and they're because of they're afraid that they could be wrong. Was there? Yeah. It sounds like Frank probably not so much, but in from your perspective, was there ever a moment in the beginning when you decide that you're going to keep the gym open, that you're like, what if we're wrong? What if we put people in danger? Was there any little bit of doubt?
At first, I think we were very skeptical from the beginning. Speaking personally, I took it seriously at first. But like I said, Frank is Frank is, I could probably say this with confidence, that Frank is probably the smartest person I've ever met, especially when it comes to science. Like there's a reason that I wound up as the person on the news, is because Frank is so smart. It's sometimes it's hard for the average person to understand him, because he understands things so well, and he wants to get you to that level, but you're like, it's like information overload. Because I mean, I can't tell you how many doctors have called, and Frank will talk them into a corner. We used to get angry phone calls all the time, and they'd be like, how dare you, and I would just say fuck you and hang up the phone. But a lot of times, Frank would say like, hey, like, what are you mad about? And he would spend time, and I used to get pissed off at him because we had other stuff to do, but he would sit there sometimes half hour, an hour, and have a phone conversation with these people. And he would let them talk, and he would let them kind of cool down. And but a lot of them were doctors, and a lot of them were nurses. And he would start asking these people. I mean, there's a video, they actually just deleted my Instagram, but there's a video on my Instagram where the health department comes. And the health department shows up. They ask if they can come in, and we say no, because we already let them in once and they just screwed us over. So we said, no, you can talk to us outside. So we go outside, and Frank's talking to them. And this lady's the head of the Camden County Health Department. And Frank just absolutely schools her, like to the point where she doesn't know what to say. He's asking her like very simple questions and letting her he's laying just traps for her. He's asking her about the PCR test and other things. And he's got his head around it so good that it's incredible. There's very few people I know that pay attention to detail and absorb it the way he does. So when we opened, I put my faith in Frank. Frank taught me everything I know about the science behind it. Now I have a really good understanding of it. But it wasn't as if I was like some expert on it before. We became experts because we had to. On day one of the shutdown, we were at work. We had stuff to do at the gym, but we were just reading. We were reading and paying attention. Frank was printing off every single study he could find. He wanted to know where the virus was, how long it's been studied, what the rate of transmission was, all this stuff that normally 99% of the population turns on the TV and they say, all right, it's a deadly virus. It says so right there. And that's about as far as they go. Whereas he dug deep right from the beginning. So by the time we decided to reopen, I was confident that he had educated me, and that we wouldn't have opened otherwise. Let's just put it that way in a short sense. But the confidence came from Frank, because I knew he was right, even without being as smart as he was. Because I'm like, there's no fucking, like, he would show me the stuff and he would break it down, and he would show me in there like where the studies said like, hey, listen, like they're making this up, like they're guessing. They don't know. And that was reassuring, because I don't know if I could have opened. Like, I don't know if I could have been so on board, thinking that people were going to be dropping dead like that video in China. But then also at the same time, they're telling you it's this like deadly thing, and you're seeing all this stuff, and then you're like, where's everybody that's dying? That was my thought. I'm not very smart at all. I have a lot of common sense, I think. It's like, well, where's everybody that's dying? That they were, especially at that point in the beginning, it was like there was nonstop news coverage about it. But like everybody I knew was fine, and everybody they knew was fine, and it was always like this like fringe, like one person that died, and it's like, well, if you look at that in 2019, if I survey all my friends, if their grandfather or grandparent or overweight uncle or aunt, somebody's got a death in there somewhere, and it was like a respiratory condition, or so it's like common sense led me to be confident. But I had Frank there to guide me, and like I said, if I didn't have that, I don't think that I could have been so on board.
Yeah, and the thing is, when businesses like yours open, and so many other businesses who are like, you know what, I'm gonna push back, I'm gonna open, I'm gonna let people come here, when it doesn't lead to any tragic story of people like, It's like the Super Bowl. There's that meme of Fauci when he was asked about the holidays. Like, oh, we still got to wait and see about the holidays. I don't know if about gathering with the family, but and then that's Fauci on top, and then on the bottom is like all these people gathered at the Super Bowl. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? So I can't get together with my family on the holidays, but all these people can get. It's like it makes even the masks. Like I kept telling people, I'm like, what if we know that the vaccine doesn't? Even the vaccine makers themselves don't say that it stops the spread or stop you from getting it, but yet they're giving you the incentive that you don't have to wear a mask if you get vaccinated. How does that make any logical sense? All they're doing is trying to give you more and more reasons to get vaccinated. When Dr. Sanjay Gupta was on Joe Rogan, it was not about any of the sense that Joe Rogan was saying. Like, wait, why would a healthy kid get vaccinated? Why would the virus? I mean, this is the thing about the virus. I kept telling people, I'm like, listen, the virus, even if you believe statistics and what the information that you've been fed, basically they can't deny that like the average age is like basically the average life expectancy. And so I've seen some numbers where they say the medium age is actually higher than the life expectancy.
It is by a half a year.
Yeah,
by half a year.
Which is crazy. Like you lose a little bit of time if you don't get COVID. And so like and then also like there's that study out of Italy that like some ridiculous percentage, like 80% or 90% of people who died of COVID in 2020 were people that they predicted were going to die anyways that year because there
was no statistical difference in the amount of deaths in the United States from 2019 to 2020. That's the same ballpark number. I think it was like 4.5 million. I don't quote me on that, but 4.5 million people died in 2019, and like 4.51 million people died in 2020. And it's like, if you can't look at that stuff and be like, wait a second, then like, how smart are you really? You know what I mean? Or how traumatized have you been? Because again, I don't consider myself an overly smart individual at all. But when I look at that and I go, you told me that this was the deadliest thing ever. But the same amount of people died year over year. How? And even that, like, as time goes on, you're just reinforcing this idea that it's not as, like how they're still running this play almost 2 years later is fascinating to me. I mean, it just shows the power of media in general, the power of media and the power of, I guess, ignorance. But the fact that
also because they've conditioned us, like it's one of those things like when gas prices went really high and then we're like, oh my god, look how expensive gas is, then they just lowered a little bit and then we're like, okay, this is better.
Yes, yeah.
They took away everything, then they give you a little bit back and we're supposed to be excited. It's when I had Hotep Jesus on my show, and I've said this a bunch of times because I thought it was really clever of him to put it this way. He talked about how, like, if I give you 10 feet of chain, are you free? If I give you 50 feet of chain, are you free? If I give you 1,000,000 feet of chain, are you free? And it's like, you're still on a chain. And it's such a clever way of putting it, because what they're doing is they keep giving us more chain, but they still got us chained down.
Chain, yeah.
The government isn't supposed to give you freedoms. They're supposed to protect them. And that's what people don't understand. Like, I was born in Portugal. I had grandparents that lived through, Salazar, which was a dictator. A lot of foreigners and people from other countries still remember these stories of dictatorships and monarchies and all this stuff. And in America, it's like, because we only learn American history, which is this, in many cases, when you talk about like the fight against tyranny with the English, the English monarchy, we think like, oh, that was a thing of the past. Like, people don't want to control people like they used to. It's like, no, there's still countries that have dictators. There's still countries that, like, look at China. I mean, they just control all their
human nature.
Yeah, it's
just the way of the world.
Yeah, there's always been it's want to control others.
We've lived too good for too long. And it's that it pisses me off because it drives me nuts, but it's the cycle of, good men create, or strong men create good times create and it's like, we need to get to the point where good men or strong men create good times, and good times create more strong men, so that we can just kind of keep having good times. But we fall into this trap where, for the past 70 years or so, life's been a little too easy. And there's been a little too much to distract us, and we stopped paying attention to important things like politics. How many times did you hear growing up that, what don't you say at the dinner table? Politics and religion. No, those are two pretty fucking important topics, as we're now learning. But we got to the thing where it was like, and there's this cultural change over time where it's like, oh, you have to be politically correct and you can't say this and you can't say that. It's this slow degradation of the same system that keeps us protected from this crap, and we forget about it and we're entertained and then our educational system starts to change. It's so funny because I was educated more outside of school than I was in school. I had a stepfather who was a major history buff, but just a wildly smart guy in general, and me and my stepbrother would sit at the dinner table and we get a history lesson every single night. And it wasn't over until he was done talking about it, so when I already knew all this stuff, and he was big on the fact that, you're supposed to pay attention to history because there's lessons to be learned, and that no matter how far in the future you get, human nature doesn't change. And I find it funny now, especially now, but even when I was in school, we learn about dictators in one form or two forms. We learn about, the American Revolution, right? And then the only other real thing that we learn about is Nazism, and it's like, I'm not giving Hitler any free passes here. But why do we just breeze over communism? Like, when you learn American history these days, it's like, oh, the Germans and the Nazis, and they were terrible and they killed everybody. And then there was this guy Stalin, and he wasn't a great guy, but it's just whatever, and it's like, no, that was actually the thing that killed more people than anything. And we're watching it manifest right now. We're watching the same things that happened, as societies slowly turn towards that gentle slide into this groupthink tyranny, that we saw in Soviet Russia, and that we saw in China, and we saw in all these places, and that we're still seeing in China, and that we're still seeing in all these places around the world. But we've been conditioned to think that, like, only the white supremacists can be fascists, and only the only the fascists and the white supremacists can be tyrants. And it's like, no, we got this whole other ideology that's like living and breathing and growing in America right now. That is something that everybody should be concerned about. But these kids aren't even educated on it. And then not only are they not educated on the dangers of it, they're propagandized to the benefits of it that don't exist. They're lied to, and you have this whole generation of kids now, not even kids. I mean, some of them are my age and older, that think this is a good idea, that think the direction that we're heading, where government tells you what to do, and government's mommy and government's daddy, and government gives you your rights because government cares for you, and government will feed you and pay for your college, and you'll just have this great job when you grow up. You'll just be an artist or whatever you want because you'll have a universal basic income. These are all really dangerous ideologies that have been normalized in American culture, and it's crazy because if you can't see that, you've obviously not learned about it. But when you look at the educational system and you're like, oh well, there's a reason for that.
Well, like you said, history is so important because it does repeat, or at least, well, somebody said, like,
mirrors.
Yeah, even if it doesn't repeat, they say it rhymes. It's
Yeah,
which is another great way of putting it. I mean, we went back, and my wife and I went back and watched Dallas Buyers Club because Dr. Fauci was kind of part of that, and in regards to, I mean, he did the same thing where he went back. We went back and I rewatched a interview he did when he scared the shit out of the public when during a interview, it might have been 60 Minutes or one of the 2020, who knows, one of the primetime shows, and he's like, yeah, we think that the virus could transmit through the air. We don't know yet, and like he knew that wasn't even a possibility, that people weren't getting AIDS from the virus, from the virus being in the air, but he just planted that seed of like that possibility and scared the shit out of people. So this isn't the first time he's scared the shit out of people, and the guy is a politician. He's the highest paid government employee. He does way too many interviews to ever, have time to
I don't
read.
think he's been in a lab ever. I mean, like, I don't think he's been in a lab in the past probably 15 years, other than to like do a walkthrough because he's funding it. Like, I don't think he's actually done any lab work or any science work. I would say probably 15 years. Not to mention that he's been wrong on pretty much everything.
Everything.
And he's made a living. He's made a living out of scaring people. Like, not only does he scare people, but he's made a career out of it. You know, he's the bearer of bad news that makes a tremendous paycheck. And for some reason, he's always got some bad news every couple of years.
Yeah, and what's crazy is people listen to him, and then they'll talk about Joe Rogan, who, this is the thing about being a gym rat, right? Is that one thing about being in the gym all the time is that we're constantly sharing information with others about like nutritional advice. And, I've always been huge into health. I've had Dr. Dominic D'Agostino on. I've had, CJ Hunt, who did the Perfect Human Diet. I've had so many different people throughout the years, Dr. Brzezinski, Dr. Gregory Smith, like all these people who, because I feel like health was one of those topics where like, okay, we could talk about history on this show. I've had Gerard Williams, speaking of Hitler, he wrote Grey Wolf, The Escape of Adolf Hitler, and him making it to Argentina. Like, that's fascinating. But the thing is, when I did health podcasts, I'm like, this is information that could change your life today. Like, you could clearly, like, your depression, your lack of energy, your your bad moods, your whatever it is, your stress, this can benefit all that stuff in some way if you just, ate a little cleaner. And of course, people have different opinions on what eating right is. But I think, for the most part, I always say, like, look at the things.
Conversation's always worth having, though.
Yeah. And the thing is, there's a couple things that we all kind of agree on. Like, don't eat processed food. Don't, minimize, McDonald's out of your diet. Like, don't drink sodas. Don't drink, I'm big in the ketogenic diet and the carnivore diet. I do like a ketovore diet. And but it to me, like, I always tell people, I'm like, listen, you don't have to do the keto diet. I'm like, but like, get rid of processed foods. Get rid of, what drives me nuts is that, you talked about McDonald's, and it reminds me of this metaphor I always mention when we talk about health, is how it drives me nuts that people, like in a Mercedes, AMG Mercedes, that needs synthetic oil, high octane gas, is in the drive-through at McDonald's. And I'm like, that car needs all the best fuel, and you're putting the cheapest fuel in your body. And guess what? If that car breaks down, you can trade it in, and your body. So
you can't.
I use this metaphor that I'm like, your body is like a car that you can never trade in. I'm like, if you knew you had this car forever, you would put the best stuff in it, you take care of it. And I'm like, and that basically is your body. It's a car that you can't trade in. So when the rims start falling apart and the steering wheel is wobbly and all this stuff, I'm like, you're stuck with that because you didn't take care of it. And so it boggles my mind how many people will cut corners in food and nutrition and gym memberships. Oh, the gym membership's too expensive or whatever. I'm like, or the gym, I don't have time to go to the gym. Like, everybody has time to go to the gym. I go first thing in the morning when it opens because I have kids and I like to see them when I get home from work. So I get it out of the way in the morning. I hate waking up in the morning and going to the gym. But when I get there, I feel better.
Great. For the rest of the day, you feel good.
Yeah, and it's one more thing you can check off the list of your to-do list. And like you said, the other thing that you hit on that is so important is the community and social atmosphere of a gym. Like, we're social creatures, and a lot of people, they might be working in a cubicle where they don't have a lot of social interaction. So the gym is a nice place where you see some of the familiar faces, a little small talk here, a little small talk there. Like, I've had some of my best conversations at the gym, and and I've probably,
a lot of people build their entire social life around that, because you're going to a place where people have common interests, and especially if you're in an environment, like a lot of people, you said sitting in a cubicle, a lot of people are sitting in this work environment, and like the people at their work have very little to do with their actual like worldly interests. And that's, whatever, it is what it is, but either that or they don't get to socialize at work, or there's social barriers at work or whatever. And going to the gym or going to a martial arts class or anything like that, anything physical, going to play some rec basketball or anything like that, there's so much benefit from it on a social and mental and emotional and even a spiritual level. Like, that's what we're meant to do. We're meant to interact. You know what I mean? Like one of the things in solitary, when I was in prison, I did a significant amount of time in solitary confinement. And I can tell you right now, it's fucking miserable. You know what I mean? It's like they make that a punishment because they know it's not good for you. You know, and they know that it can be really traumatizing. Like even the most introverted people like to interact. You know what I mean? But for a lot of people, I don't think people really realized how important that was until this year, or until last year. You know, but it is. It can make or break a person. You know, we like to have small talk, but we also like to pass ideas. That's how we learn and grow. And we also like to let others know about our accomplishments and what our goals and our plans are, and that has to do with our confidence and our ability to move forward. You know, like there's so many aspects you can't even begin to quantify about how beneficial it is to bring people together, and they just pushed everybody apart. And it was the worst possible thing that they could do, and they're still trying to do it. You know, they're still trying to push these like virtual meetings, and it's like trying to do work in a Zoom meeting is like the most just weird thing ever. Like it's so inhuman. You just miss all those characteristics. And when you're talking about productivity and stuff like that, it's like how much innovation and progress did we lose over the past 2 years while we were all dicking around on Zoom, you know, like pretending to socialize and pretending to work. Like nobody's really been working. You know what I mean? Like we've just been keeping the ship going. But like where's that American innovation? Where's all that stuff? Like people that is like not died out, but that was really sequestered for a good period of time. You know, kids weren't in school, kids weren't at college. Like this is where the magic happens, you know, like, and these kids were like learning online. Like it's the most ridiculous thing ever. The schoolwork that I was watching, you know, my 16-year-old stepson do was just an absolute joke, like an absolute joke, you know. And this is a kid that loves to go to school because he's in JROTC. And he flourishes in that environment, like he really does, and that's for him. And they took it away from him and stuck him in front of a computer screen where it's like, yeah, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but he's certainly not growing, and he's certainly not learning. Answering a couple multiple choice questions while he looks at his phone and a video plays, and that's it. So it's really that was all of that played in, and it's. If you don't see that by now, I don't know if your mind will ever change. But if you do see that at this point, and you're not doing something about it, and you're not being active, and you're not speaking out about it, then you need to reevaluate what your values actually are. Because if you're okay with this shit at this point, you know it's and that has nothing to do with whether you want the vaccine or whether you don't want the vaccine or whether you want a mask or you don't want a mask. If you're okay with a good portion of the population being told what to do by a government that very clearly doesn't give a shit about the individual, then that's the problem. And then, you know, and that's where I start to draw my lines, because enough time has passed that any rational individual can look at this and be like, this isn't the way, you know, like let's turn back. And that's, I think we're at that point now where there's more people who are thinking like that than ever. And what I'm really waiting for is to see the action. The awareness, I think, is as aware as it's going to get. I think as enough people are woken up to the nonsense and have educated themselves or been educated by others. So there's not a whole lot of awareness that's needed. And people need to now start doing stuff. You know, and you're seeing that a lot. You're seeing that at school board meetings and stuff like that. These parents are turning out in droves, but it needs to be more. It needs to be more. And we need to not forget that moving forward. You know, we need to remember that it's our duty as citizens of this country to pay attention to what is going on. That's how we got here in the first place. We weren't paying attention. We were living our lives, and to no fault of any of ours, but we were living our lives not paying attention. And these people very slowly but surely changed enough so that one day they could turn around and flip the switch, and none of us knew what to do with it. So that's my hope moving forward, is that people realize that that there's some urgency here, and now it's about not only being aware of what they're doing, but doing your part in resisting, not complying, pushing back, advocating for change.
Yeah, I think getting involved locally is so important.
The win.
It's locally where I live in Massachusetts, right outside of Springfield, Mass, where the Basketball Hall of Fame is, in this town called Ludlow. And I was going to school committee meetings and fighting for the kids not to have to wear masks. And so many parents came out and talked to me and was telling me things that were going on, like books with gay sex cartoons in the middle school, like all this. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? And I'm like, my kids were not in the middle school yet. So, and I've been so focused on international and national news and historical stuff that I'm like, all this stuff is going on in my backyard and I'm not even aware of it. I'm like, I'm so informed nationally and then uninformed locally, and that's where I could really create a difference. So you're absolutely right. And the other thing that you said that is so important is that people have to not stop paying attention, because the problem, like I've said this too when the pandemic happened. I'm like, you have people like myself. I've had Del Bigtree on a bunch. Del Bigtree, James Corbett, who's a friend of mine, Whitney Webb, who's a friend of mine, Ryan from Last American Vagabond, who's a friend of mine. These guys have been doing amazing work, warning people that, like, hey, Big Pharma's not
for years.
Yeah, for years. Big Pharma's not the good guys. Like, they're not. This isn't a new thing. There's the vaccine agenda, all this stuff, CRISPR. You want to talk about the RNA, DNA type thing? Like, how much of this is maybe making us normalizing this idea of messing around with DNA or RNA?
It is.
People have been talking about this for a long time, and it's like all of a sudden people are paying attention. It's like, listen, motherfuckers, I've been telling you when you guys were going to your 9 to 5, but this is the thing, is like, it didn't affect them personally. It's almost like when we're
it has to affect them personally for them to start paying attention. There's a small portion of the population, these are your your pioneers. It's the same thing in the market. When there's a new product, you have early adapters and stuff like that, but that's just human nature. But most people are not going to pay attention to the level that some of us have until it's at their doorstep. And that's now what you're seeing with the vaccine mandates is, and that was very early on, as a small business person, we had so much support and it was amazing. And I'm so thankful for that. But at the end of the day, most of our support went home to somewhat of a normal life, and didn't have any hard choices to make. Yeah, they were slightly inconvenienced, whatever. Now, almost everybody, something's knocking at the door, and it's loss of job, threatening income is the number one threat right now. But a lot of kids now are like looking at this and they're like, wait, I can't go to school? I can't, I'm halfway through school, or I'm 3 years through my degree. And as much as that sucks, that could possibly be the best thing that's ever happened to all of us, because it draws so many people into a unified front against all of this. And that's what they've done for years now, is these people play this game of inches, where one or two things happen. Either they take just enough to where if you respond with outrage, you're just like, you're out of control. Like, because they're like, oh, you're overreacting. It's only this. It's only this little gun law. Like relax. We're not coming for your guns. We just want this part here. Or it doesn't affect everybody, so you don't have that unified front where, it's like, oh well, that sucks for that guy. But hey, I got to go to work in the morning. And they've gotten very good at doing both of those things at the same time. Now, with the vaccine mandates, I think they've made it serious enough that people can rightfully be like, yo, what the fuck? And at the same time, they brought enough people into the fold that what the fuck is very loud, because there's a lot of people saying it. But and I got to run, but I'll leave you with jumping off of what you said about the local politics. I think the biggest takeaway that anybody can have, or the biggest mission that anybody can have for people who want to do something, is at the local level. We've been so focused on the Joe Bidens and the Nancy Pelosi's and the Mitch McConnells and all these federal people who are so far removed from us that they don't give a shit what we say. Like, they don't care at all. No amount of outrage, angry tweets, memes, just sharing articles and, calling for impeachments. None of this stuff affects Nancy Pelosi. None of this stuff affects Mitch McConnell. None of it affects any, whether it's Republican or Democrat. They don't care. And they're not afraid of you in the least bit. The people that are in your communities, that are on your school board, that are your mayor, that are your town council, that are your county freeholders and your county commissioners, and all these people can't withstand the public outrage and just being upset the way that they put a fence around the Capitol, for God's sakes. That's how much they don't care about what you have to say. But your local mayor can't do that. Your county board can't do that. They have to hear your voice, and they can't run from it. And I don't think that they have the medley or the stones to withstand the heat for very long. And you're seeing it all across the country, especially in the school boards. These people are folding their cards so quickly. When angry parents come out, when angry townspeople and county people come out and their voices are being heard, that is where your battles will be won. And you can worry about everything on the way up after that, but you have to establish that base. You have to take control of your community. You have to be active in your community. A, because you're not going to get anywhere until you do, but B, you've got to get some foundation first. Like, you can't just be yelling up at the sky at Congress, about how pissed off you are. But what you can do is you can stop the bullshit in your school. You can make sure your kids are safe, and there's not going to be some weird vaccination policy like they have in New York, where like going to school is consent. I think that was in New York, California, whatever it is. You essentially, by enrolling your child, you consent to any medical treatment or whatever weird stuff they try to sneak in. So you focus there. And I think if 100 million Americans start doing that, you'll see the landscape of this country, both politically and culturally, change really, really fast in a good direction.
I know you say you're not smart, but I think we have different definitions of smart, because I would really smart. No, you're absolutely right, man. And and before I know you got to go, but I have to give you some credit, because people don't understand the sacrifice you made with getting fined, $15,000+ a day, not charging your members for a long period of time.
Still not.
It's not like you came from money and you could afford just to do this. You sacrificed everything, and so did Frank. So you guys, are legit heroes. And when the shit hits the fan, you guys stepped up and you were willing to push back. And it's because of people like you guys that things haven't gotten worse. It's because some people are protesting, and luckily, I think, on the bright side, and I'm trying to look at this optimistically, I think that because we're so removed from the election, because they're making everything so political, where all these things that weren't political issues, like a vaccine mandate and all these things, are finally being looked at as not political. And now you have unions fighting back. You have, athletes fighting back, and people are just looking at this logically for once. And like, you know what? This doesn't make any fucking sense. If I've already had COVID and there's a better chance of me getting struck by lightning than dying from this, why should I get this vaccine that's not FDA approved? Not that FDA is a fucking gold standard anyway. There's plenty.
I actually laughed really hard about that the other day. Somebody sent me a nasty message on Instagram about taking supplements, and they're not FDA approved. And I was like, I didn't even know how to respond to it, because I'm like, well, I don't know how to unpack that statement that you trust the FDA, because if you have any common sense about you, or any just awareness at all, you'd realize that they've made more than one mistake in the past.
Plenty. there's plenty of lawyers that would benefit from that when they say, call my law
Yeah.
office if you've had a loved one who died from this FDA approved drug. Like people see that shit all the time. And the other thing about vitamins that drive me nuts is that most of it comes from food. So you can't patent a lot of these supplements. And because you can't patent them, that means there's not a lot of money in them. So if you're asking them to get FDA approved and go through this whole process, there's not going to be any money in it. It's like you can't afford to make some organic vitamin C, that comes from food. And then say that it has to be tested. Like, well, it only makes common sense if eating these healthy foods that have these vitamins, which means that the vitamins are good for you. If they make you feel better, then obviously taking an extract of that would make you feel better. I mean, the whole vitamin thing. And don't get me wrong, there's some shitty or supplement.
There's plenty, but that's you can apply that across any business, in the world.
Yeah.
There's plenty of shitty fucking Chinese restaurants, but I still like some good Chinese food. You know what I mean?
But thank you so much, Ian. I really like. I love. I'm sure this wasn't your initial. The way you were looking at your future was being a spokesperson for freedom, but you have become that, and I'm glad you're on our side and you have the courage to speak out and put everything on the line for it. You're helping us all in this fight, being outspoken and then doing what you're doing. So thank you so much. Let people know where they can find you. Any websites, anything, any social media platforms you're on.
I mean, two places. On Instagram, I recently got my account with I think I had 402,000 followers, just taken down recently because I was talking about the irregularities of the New Jersey election. But I do have a backup account that is Ian Smith Fitness Backup. You have to spell the entire thing out or I will not show up at all. There's a bunch of other like fake accounts. So make sure you find the one. It's got about 100,000 followers. You'll see my ugly face on there. That and www.theatilisgym.com. And Atilis is spelled Atilis. That's where we have merchandise. You can donate. There's a part one of a two-part book coming out, which details the entire thing from before Frank and I met, and buying the gym, why we opened, the science that we used to justify our opening, every detail. We had a woman who was with us pretty much the whole time, who chronicled not only what was happening with the gym, but what was happening with myself, with Frank, and all the other characters who made it possible, because it definitely wasn't just Frank and I. It was our family. It was our members. So that's coming out soon. That's available for pre-order. Yeah. And if you ever want to stop by the gym, we're in Belmar, New Jersey. Our doors are always open. We never charge. All you got to do is come on in and grab a spray bottle and make sure you wipe some shit down.
That's awesome.
All right.
Thanks, Ian. Hey, I really enjoyed this. You have an open invite. Hopefully we'll chat again in the future.
Sure. Thanks again, man.
Take care.